Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Nargis Kasyanova, and I'm director of the program on Central Asia at the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies. A very warm welcome to the discussion revisiting the social contract reforms in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Constitutional reform is underway in Uzbekistan, and it is reported that the final draft of the constitutional amendments declares Uzbekistan a social state and triples the state's obligations to citizens. And that's one of the main features of new Uzbekistan, the building of which President Mirziyoyev announced in 2021. In Kazakhstan, we see a similar dynamic. While according to the constitution, Kazakhstan has been a social state since 1995, in reality, socio-economic disparities went up. And I think there is pretty much a consensus now that these disparities have reached a dangerous level. President Tokayev talks a lot about the promotion of social justice, more equitable access to quality education and healthcare, etc. So today we gather to discuss this trend, to discuss the ongoing socio-economic reforms in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, to discuss barriers and opportunities for structural change. And we have a great panel with us today. Let me introduce the speakers in the order I will ask them to give their initial remarks. We will start with Aziza Umarova, who is an independent researcher working on issues of public governance reform. And I'm very happy to say that Aziza was a fellow at the Davis Center last semester. And she is a mastermind behind this event. She is also a development practitioner who served as advisor on public sector innovation at the UNDP's Global Center for Public Sector Excellence in Singapore. Earlier, she led UNDP's governance portfolio in Uzbekistan. Since 2017, she has devised and delivered numerous public policy projects through her own boutique strategy consulting company, SmartGov, working closely with governments on institutional reforms. Welcome back to the Davis Center, Aziza, virtually. Our next speaker is Dr. Saltanat Zhanenova, who is a lecturer in public policy at the School for Policy Studies, University of Bristol. And she's also a professor of at the Public Administration Academy under the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan. She has over a decade of experience in teaching and research in public administration and public management. Previously, she worked in the Graduate School of Public Policy at Nazarbayev University and International Development Department at the School of Government at the University of Birmingham. Her research interests include public sector reforms in the Eurasian region, open government, corruption, authoritarianism, and public service innovations. Besides teaching and research, Saltanat has been a national consultant for various international organizations, OECD, UNDP, EU delegation to Kazakhstan, and she co-authored a book, Primer on Policy Communication Kazakhstan, which was recently published by Palgrave Macmillan. It's great you're joining us today, Saltanat. And last but not least, we have Dr. Bahrom Rajabov with us, who is an expert on social innovation, political economy, and international development with a focus on the Eurasian region. He's currently head of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation in Uzbekistan, and is also an adjunct professor at Webster University in Tashkent, where he teaches international relations and education and innovation. Previously, he worked for the programs run by the UNDP in Uzbekistan and the German International Development Corporation, GIZ. He also served as the project manager of the UNDP Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations joint project aimed at adapting population skills to the post-pandemic economy in Fergana Valley. Dr. Rajabov holds a PhD in social sciences from the University of Tsukuba, and he is the author of the book Social Innovations in Post-Soviet Countries, published by Routledge last year. So welcome, Bahrom. So without further ado, let's start our discussion. And first, I want to go to you, Aziza. What is the state of affairs in Uzbekistan?
Thank you very much, Nargis. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to talk about this very important issue right now, because I see lots of similarities between processing.
I think the sound is not, there's something wrong with the sound.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Before it was fine, before we started the webinar, the sound was good.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Maybe it's better if we try to reconnect and we start with Saltanat. Can we go?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much, Nargis, for welcoming to the Davis Center. Today, I would like to share my reflections on socio-economic reforms in Kazakhstan. Right after the tragic Bloody January events in January 2022, the President Tokayev announced a broad package of socio-economic reforms and announced the movement of Kazakhstan towards a fair and just state, one nation, and prosperous society. The aim behind these socioeconomic reforms are twofold: is mainly to restore public trust of the president and the government, and to get legitimacy in the eyes of Kazakhstani people. So the key areas of socioeconomic reforms can be broadly defined as de-monopolization, economic redistribution, more fair redistribution of public funds, de-oligarchization, and reducing inequalities, especially in rural areas. I would comment on some barriers and opportunities for the governments of Kazakhstan and give final remarks. So first of all is that there was a launch of several initiatives to demonopolize the economy. President Tokayev stated that we need to reduce the interference of the state into the monopoly of the prices. So there will be a complete overhaul of the tax codes and digitalization of tax control to abolish face-to-face contacts in order to reduce corruption. There will be massive transformation of the sovereign wealth fund, Samruk-Kazyna, who will become a majority stake owner. Samruk will participate only in critically important projects that cannot be implemented by private investors. And it's more recently, so Samruk-Kazyna was highly criticized for the lack of transparency and accountability by the president himself. So these are the transformation that have led into the package. Economic redistribution of public funds is another major area within the reforms. The President Tokayev ordered that there should be more effective use of national funds, that the funds should be used only for critical infrastructure and national projects. For example, there was an announcement of the National Fund for Children, when starting from 2024, there will be allocation of 50% of the annual investment income of the National Fund to support children. So these funds will be able to use when the children reach 18 years old for purchasing housing and investment into their education. Another initiative by the government is that the funds seized by the state as a result of anti-corruption campaign would be allocated for the construction of schools. There was a launch of the social funds for the people of Kazakhstan Halkına, right after the January events, when the president has requested oligarchs and the owners of large businesses to donate and provide financial support to these funds. So the funds accumulated in these social funds are allocated for the children from low-income families for their educational and healthcare needs. The President Tokayev has announced that there should be return of financial assets to Kazakhstan, which have been illegally transferred abroad. There are different estimates of these illegal funds. For example, according to international organization Tax Justice Network, this amount is about $160 billion. However, the real figures are much higher. For example, we know that Kazakh oligarchs have invested significantly into the property in the UK, Switzerland, Germany, etc. And these assets, the property, they are not included into the amount that was published by the, for example, Tax Justice Network. Parallel initiative to return financial assets to Kazakhstan is from the public fund, Yelge Qaytaru, which is translated as Return to the Motherland. This initiative is led by Bulat Abilov, who is a famous businessman, and Orazali Yerzhanov, an ex-top official of the government. So this process of de-oligarchization is a highly politically sensitive issue. It's very complex, and it will take lots of efforts and political commitments to implement this. Just to flesh out some of the projects within socio-economic support for the people of Kazakhstan, especially in rural areas, is to try to build and revive the social infrastructure in terms of schools, hospitals, polyclinics. The retirement age of women will be fixed to 61 years until 2028, and this step of the government comes after the protest of women against increase of the retirement age from 58 to 63. Unemployment benefits have been promised for the people that will be fixed at 45% of the average income. That is unprecedented social benefits in terms of unemployment benefits. And more recently, there was adoption of the bankruptcy law for individual citizens, allowing citizens to apply to become bankrupt and cover the loan up to 5 million tenge. What are the barriers for the political leadership and government of Kazakhstan in implementing these socio-economic reforms? There are many good and genuine intentions. These reforms really show the acknowledgement of the government that there needs to be real changes in terms of supporting the well-being of Kazakhstani people. However, we should not underestimate the potential sabotage and resistance to these changes from political officials and administrative civil servants or the bureaucrats. The Kazakhstani system of public administration is still observing the flourishment of patronage and corruption-based networks and relationships. So, for example, we see very fast rebranding of Nuratan Party into Amanat Party. But the question is, who will lead and who will implement the reforms? As behind this rebranding, behind the reshuffling of government officials, most of the bureaucracy, state apparatus. I see the echo. These are the same mostly the same people who expressed loyalty to the first president and his family members. The Kazakhstani system is characterized by highly legalistic approach. When the government offers a new law to every social or economic problem, so the government hopes that by adopting a new law, the problem will be solved. This is the legacy, the path dependency of Kazakhstan following the Soviet past. We see lack of public accountability and responsibility of political officials. When there is a collapse of projects, collapse of initiatives and reforms, political officials are often reshuffled to a new position or even promoted. Limited citizens' participation in policy making, when there are very limited platforms for citizens to engage and to be listened to by the government bodies, although the government has made several attempts by introducing public councils, later National Council of Public Trusts, and now National Kurultai. As we call it in our research, Kazakhstani government represents the so-called half-open government. It demonstrates openness to international community and international organizations and investors. However, towards citizens, it shows a different face when it's half-open. Kazakhstani people demand real changes. They would not be tolerant anymore to facade or imitation of reforms. And this is a great opportunity for the government to more actively engage with civil society, with non-governmental organizations, with academics and young population. There are some islands of integrity that are good practices that exist in Kazakhstani public administration system, which give and provide optimism and hope. For example, the e-government and digitalization of public services are really, in my view, can be considered as good case studies that it is possible, even within highly corrupt environments, to demonstrate integrity and good quality of public services. I believe that we observe twofold crisis of trust in modern Kazakhstan. So the first crisis of trust is between citizens and governments that the president and the governments need to restore. And this effective implementation of these socio-economic reforms would help to return this public trust to the governments. And on the other hand, we see the crisis of trust between President Tokayev and the government itself, as most of the political officials and the bureaucrats have been formed and have worked for many years under the first president, and they expressed loyalty to the first president and family members. This is especially seen in the recent amendments to the legislation, when the President Tokayev now has a right to dismiss political officials for losing trust. This shows that the trust is a very sensitive area in the current government. The risk of renewed public unrest still remains high if the promises to fulfill these socio-economic reforms and improve the well-being of people are not fulfilled. And we will see the continuous battle and fights between the elites for resources and for redistribution of funds. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saltanat. Let me ask you two quick questions now. Before we proceed, the first one is, well, you mentioned some genuine good intentions of the leadership to carry out reforms. but we do hear a good amount of criticism as well, and criticism not only of the implementation but also of the kind of what are the kind of the drivers of these initiatives. And well, you mentioned the National Fund of Children, for example, right? Some people were saying, okay, it's just a populist idea. So there are these accusations of populism, right? What's your take on that? The second question, it's a big question, but maybe you can address it quickly. To carry out reforms, you do need. You mentioned this crisis of trust, and it seems you do need new people, but at the same time, bringing new people can also has kind of can create problems, because these people might not have credibility in the eyes of the bureaucrats, right? They might not have sufficient experience to move reforms effectively. As an expert on governance, what would be your advice? How to kind of bring new people, but also make sure that the governance is effective and you can move ahead with the reforms? Maybe you can give a kind of a teaser now, and then we can discuss in more detail later.
Thank you, Nargis. So regarding the first question, indeed, there is a lot of public discussion and critique of many initiatives and socio-economic policies announced by the political leadership, criticizing them for populism and for ineffectiveness. For example, with the rising inflation that would eat out the funds until the children reach 18 years old, and etc. However, the key focus of the current reforms towards the needs of the people, towards the needs of the especially rural areas, shows that now the government, hopefully and finally for the 30-25 years, have realized that it is critically important to provide the necessary adequate social infrastructure for the people. It is impossible to drive the country to the top 30 countries in the world unless the people have good quality of education, good quality of healthcare, and if the government would be able to implement at least some of the broader and bigger promises in terms of the school and health and social benefits for the people, this would be good achievements. And this is realistic to do if the leadership in the government bodies would be committed, if it would be transparent, accountable, and not corrupt, as the funds are available in Kazakhstan. In terms of the second question, this is a challenging question to address in terms of whether the government needs to bring new people or so. Definitely, the government needs to bring new people, but the people with the values and that who have commitments to improve public services, to promote accountability. We have seen some attempts of failure of bringing new people because the system is so corrupt, is so patronage based, it accumulates and absorbs new people and makes them to be adapted to the existing system. I think that this is a great opportunity for all senior managers in the public sector to show their good ethical leadership, to show their integrity, to fight with corruption from their daily work. And if we have good practices in every public sector organization, then there are hopes and optimism that there will be good changes.
Okay, thank you very much, Sultanat. Okay, let's go to Aziza.
Yes, I hope you can hear me well now. Excellent. I would like to echo many things that has been raised already by Sultanat, and I see a lot of similarities. And maybe that's, again, we spoke about past dependency from the Soviet Union, a lot of very specific patterns that are similar across the region. And in the meantime, I would like to say that now is an excellent timing to discuss these issues, because Uzbekistan just announced itself as a social state, and this has been proposal to be put in the new version of the constitution that at the moment government, together with the parliament, is working on. So I have two thoughts about the social state being placed in constitution. These are two very specific features of the current policy making that do not really go well with the social state. And I would like to go in depth about the role of the state in the economy. And second, I would like to make remarks about the social protection and social policy making part in Uzbekistan. So let me start with the thoughts about the current role that state plays in the economy and whether this model actually is able to nurture any middle class. And I would say most probably no. So 55% of the economy in Uzbekistan is the state through its state-owned enterprises. And altogether, they own 80% of all assets in the country. And these are, of course, primarily in the areas where state-owned enterprises are. It's oil and gas, it's energy, it's chemicals, aviation, rail, telecommunication, but also a lot of other areas where government has declared that it will be reducing its role. So, for example, in Uzbekistan, the state would own markets, for example, markets for staple foods, or it will own the plants that produce alcohol. So very atypical areas where you would not see the role of state in any other places in the world. And that means that the changes in this dynamic will actually define whether Uzbekistan will be able to become a social state or not. Because what happens, and it's not new to Uzbekistan, a lot of SOEs are struggling with its performance. There is a lot of different venues to compensate for inefficiencies through cross-subsidizing, providing tax and custom benefits, preferential loans, and government admits it from time to time. And basically what we see that with all these cross-subsidies, with a lot of support from the government that go to SOEs, it's very ineffective to even keep them going. The most painful realization is that according to different estimates, I've seen figures from 6% to 18%, but actually that's how much of jobs is being created by the state-owned enterprises. 6% of the formal employment. Again, the estimates are different because nobody owns, I think, the whole data, but the estimates are from 6 to 18% of the formal employment. This current model does not generate jobs and may be really falling short in creating employment for population in Uzbekistan, while it keeps consuming a lot of budgetary resources to support its ineffectiveness. Another interesting rift between a broader societal goods and SOEs is a competition policy. If you look at the registry of monopolies, and it's also publicly available, 80% of entities in the registry of monopolies are state-owned enterprises or businesses with a share of the state. And of course, it also undermines the level playing field. It puts any small and medium enterprise in Uzbekistan in a very disadvantaged position vis-a-vis the state-owned enterprise. They have preferential market treatment. There is very lenient regulatory enforcement and unreasonably low rates of return on the capital invested. And again, Are we able to create middle class? Are we able to nurture medium and small size businesses generating national growth and welfare? No. And what is interesting that it has been compensated so far in the last 6 years by very generous loans from IFIs, from international financial institutions. But again, these institutions, they fund, in most of cases, state-owned enterprises. So it's kind of a vicious circle. Instead of generating growth, instead of generating jobs, we keep sponsoring state-owned enterprises that are using its resources and proximity to authorities to craft legal frameworks that are creating preferential treatment to them. And in the meantime, they do not solve the main issue. The main issue is creating jobs for people across the country. The second important pattern that I would like to discuss is, and it's in a way past dependency because it also, I think, very much continuation of the Islam Karimov's policy making. It's a social protection. So Uzbekistan used to have, similar to other parts of the Soviet Union, so-called Ministry of Social Protection. And it was dismantled in March 2016. And unfortunately, since then, there was not any new social welfare ministry or agency established. And we have the portfolio of social protection scattered at different times in the last 5 years across Ministry of Health, Agency for Medical and Social Services, later it was the Ministry of Mahala, now already dismantled, Ministry of Public Education, State Committee for Women and Families, a lot of different players, was not a single leader or custodian of the policy making in the social protection. It's interesting because I would like to give you 2 examples that shows why it's needed. First of all, it will make sure that there is no corruption. So whatever is being disbursed from the budget will actually reach only if there is coordination, the policy coordination that goes and really monitors the delivery of different things. Social protection entails social allowances. Uzbekistan has been increasing its allocation, but it also social insurance and social services. So with the social services, unfortunately, we are far beyond any other comparative country in the former Soviet Union. So for example, let's look at disability rate. So during Islam Karimov time, we used to be one of the lowest country in the world. It was 1.8% of disability, with average in the world around 10 to 15% of population are disabled. So in Uzbekistan, it was 1.8. That just demonstrates that targeting was done in a way that would prevent people from receiving the status of disabled person and receiving the benefits and pensions and allowances related to this. Now the figure is 2.4. Again, average in the world is 10. So we are still very, very far beyond any country with the status of the lower middle income, like Uzbekistan, in terms of how many people we are officially recognizing as disabled and whether they have any services available to them to lead a better life. The second interesting, we definitely see there is intention and the overall dynamic towards cutting the expenditures further on social protection. And for example, around 20 orphanages has been closed down in the country in the last 3 years. Official line is, and it's true, that only 17% of children in orphanages used to be real orphans, and all the rest of children placed in the institution, in residential care, they would have some relatives or sometimes even parents, but still would be placed because of the poverty and other issues in the orphanage. But the thing is, because we don't have a Ministry of Social Welfare, we also don't have professional social workforce. We don't have case management, we don't have social workers to actually check what happened to those children. Temporarily, it's been placed with the National Guard system to monitor the situation, but we actually would expect that it will be social workers who would do a placement, training of new parents, those who were supposed to be adopting these children. Families received up to 10 children in one family. It's very difficult because, again, there was nobody to accompany professionally this process on a daily or weekly basis to make sure that it's smooth. So this type of experimentation is very unique. It was quite difficult to draw parallels with anywhere else, but that shows the need to actually establish finally a Ministry of Social Welfare with a professional social workers body to be able to work holistically on the policy changes, on the delivery of programs, being able to monitor the efficiency of the budgetary disbursements, so that there is, as a part of social contract, more promotion of well-being of people, especially those in need. And maybe that explains why at the moment Uzbekistan is also undergoing administrative reform. So there is attempt to shift the focus towards more important issues. And it's going to be a very, I think, long and comprehensive reform agenda from the president and his team. At the moment, there is a process of developing KPIs, key performance indicators for different ministries, trying to focus more on social side. Let's see again whether it will result in establishing and of institutions to actually guide the policy making, whether it will mean really the lessening the role of state in the economy, whether it will lead to a more competition on the market without supporting state-owned enterprises at the expense of the private sector. And I would like to say that right now there are some efforts done by the presidential administration to set up for the first time the delivery unit for social services. This is something that Tony Blair did in UK in 2001. And since then, more than 35 countries adopted the same approach. They created delivery unit. It's a very nimble and agile team to track presidential priorities all the way through all layers of the government to the community level and see actually what has been done to deliver on the priorities. And delivery unit so far has been tasked to put together KPIs, and whenever work starts, it may be in March or April, they will be focused on, for example, bringing pipeline to more than 5.5 million users in the rural areas, the pipeline with the safe drinking water. The delivery unit will also monitor the disbursement of micronutrients and iodine supplements to more than 9.5 million children around the country. Also the quantity of new schools to be built around the country with the focus on rural areas. So all of those areas that used to be at the periphery of the government attention and priorities, it seems to be they will be put together at the front line. And again, let's see how it goes, and let's see when it will be officially announced and acted on. But so far, it seems to be like an attempt to eat elephant one bite at a time. And if it works well, it can give a very good impetus to some developments in the social area. What is also important, I will have to say, and I think it's similar to Kazakhstan as well, even though Sultana did not mention, but looking at the region, I see the growth of the informal institutions, and it's linked to more and more religious practices and people adhering themselves to informal institutions. And we've done some research last year looking how it actually impacts the families and the social protection burden by the state. And we see that there is a lot of children that are being fathered with the second wives. And in case it's ended with the divorce, the children again add to the overall number of dependents that are supposedly should be supported by the state. And here we have a lot of legalistic issues because we do not accept by the law the institution of the second marriage. And here we see the clash between this a legalistic side, the constitution and the legislation and the practices on the ground. And I think what it actually tells us to policymakers, but also to experts who are working in this area, that there is a very loud and clear request from the public to strengthen the formal institution And if it's not done, we may see more and more families and people and communities switching to informal practices, where state will be actually facing a lot of dilemma, because at some point we will have to revisit the system of public administration, as well as formal concepts that we take as a founding for us. That's why I would like to say that it's a very good timing to be open and blunt about the challenges, but I think it's also a great time to think out of the box and see how we can support countries in Central Asia with a more focus on social services, on social insurance and social allowances, so that there is a sense of justice and fairness in the public that prevails. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aziz. You covered a lot of ground. One question on mahalas, and you mentioned that the Ministry of Mahalas, and that was kind of, sort of responsible for social protection. Under Mirziyoyev, what is the kind of what is the approach to mahalas? Do you see kind of a shift of emphasis from mahalas to something else, to more kind of state-led, as you said, formalized kind of mechanisms or not? And also, you mentioned similarities between the Uzbek and Kazakh problems, but also approaches. You know both countries. What are the differences? Like in a nutshell, are there differences in approaches that we see between the Mirziyoyev administration and Tokayev administration handling these issues? I understand the contexts are different.
Yes. So let me quickly reflect on the first issues of mahala. I think because it's highly vertical control system, it's quite difficult to expect from mahala to be an effective organization, because on the level where there is division of resources definitely would not go all the way to the mahala level. It's done at the higher level. And again, I see here a lot of, past dependency from the Soviet Union as well. So it's done in the capital, of course, at most it can go to the regional level, but it's never even the city level, let alone the community level. Usually mahala is around 2,000 people. So for this very low unit, with no access to resources, and with people who are not professionally trained, we don't have any social workers, they don't have any people who actually professionally can deal with the problems, they hardly can try to solve the issue at the local level. However, what they can do ideally, they can be a very good referral mechanism. They could actually take the problems and get it to the right responsible body. But for that, you have to completely rewrite and rewire the way the mahala is working. And whether somebody will do it, it's another question. So there is a potential, there is always a glass that is half full. But for that, you need to completely change the DNA of mahala and make it then the extension of the government arm, but with the clarity of, how they do referrals to where, how they can actually connect people better with somebody else, and then also monitor then whether the issue was solved or not. And again, so far, mahala is not, in my view, I may be wrong, but I don't think it's actually fit for purpose without all these transformations. The second question about the differences and similarities, it's interesting, but I feel that there were a lot of differences before, but it seems like we are originating from one point, going in diversion, but coming again to one point after 31 years of independence, because we both, in a way, I think, have to work on check and balances, more the parliament independence. But in the meantime, because we are fighting the same problem, the same root cause, I don't see many differences at the moment, because with liberalization of the currency control mechanism, we've got some. international companies coming to the market. Uzbekistan is much more now, I think, well-versed in speaking to investors. We've got different, franchising business entering us. So we don't have any problems now with the currency as we used to have 6 years ago. However, the nature of social contract is the same. Whether we call it oligarchs or not, the SOE business is not actually, a proper public enterprises. It also can be very much a good manifestation of the patronage mentioned by Sultanate. So in a way, I see that we have actually a lot of similarities, much more than we would have 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, I would tell that Kazakhstan is a liberal economy and Uzbekistan is clear entity state that produces and consumes at the same time with a lot of limitation of import practices. But it's not that evident anymore. And that's why maybe actually the countries should also discuss together how they are dealing with the challenges, because most probably solutions will be the same. And I see here the space for future regional exchanges as well, among experts to talk more, what could be done to actually solve the issue. And yes, we have a more pressing issue of the growing population. We have more percent in demographic of people who are below 18. But again, the nature of the problem, the request from the public that I see is very much similar.
Thank you very much, Aziza. Okay, Bahrom, can we go to you? We talked about the top-down approaches. I think your research is more on bottom-up. Can you share your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Nargis. I particularly like that both in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, now we call it the new Kazakhstan and new Uzbekistan, because new is in a way one of the features of social innovation that I was asked to comment on today in both countries. And second thing is the experts are usually very good in telling what is wrong. Yes, and it's in a way also then the next step is to point out what should be done, and this is exactly what we are now trying to do and to discuss today. And here I would like first of all to mention that quite often, I would say, just following the experts in both countries, sometimes I observe the confusion between the analysis, in a way, the political discourse analysis and the policy analysis. Based on this, my observation, first, the political discourse analysis, as you know, usually focus first of all on the more or less linguistic and discourse dimensions, and discussing more the political texts and talks, right, and to see what is then the implications of this on political nature and practices, while the policy analysis is the discussion of the ideas, the ideation. The ideas, framing analysis and processes, and how they impact the policy change. And here social innovation is, I would say, something that is correct to discuss. First of all, the first question I receive when I talk about social innovation is, okay, give us the example. What is social innovation? What are you talking about here? So one example, which I think if you Google social innovation, you'll find is the microcrediting or microfinancing. And the person there is Muhammad Yunus, right, who also received the Nobel Prize for that. But let's focus on Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan here. You're right, I did the research on the Central Asia, South Caucasus, and two countries, Ukraine and Moldova, as well. So in total 9 countries. I will be talking about Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, but I'm open for some questions, even to compare this so-called post-Soviet experiences and social innovations. First thing to mention is that it's theoretically very difficult to come up with a comprehensive approach to analyze social innovations. Of course, in my research, I had to make this choice, and I looked at the social innovation projects that are that would be new social practices. And here, you know, to analyze things, then of course I applied the theory, and for me it was a social practice theory. So what does it mean? Basically, is I was looking on this bottom-up initiatives, new practices that would potentially replace old inefficient practices in solving any social issues. And here the central thing is to look at the inventions, yeah, new things, because if you talk about social innovations, of course, the first expectation is, yeah, there should be something new in there. And of course, this invention comes as a social practice in the society as a result of imitation, basically repetition. Yeah? Then when you repeat the practices, which are not repeating themselves by default on the micro level, then they come as a routine over some time. And finally, should hopefully make a positive social change in the society. From this perspective, I would say both in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and I took like 8 features to compare these two countries, 8 features of social innovations. First was the newness. Second, on social innovation, they should be people-centered. This is exactly what you just mentioned, you know, coming from the bottom, not imposed by the top. Then there should be certain networking there and collaboration in the society. And here, of course, there are so many discussions of whether this is the social innovation is something that should be done only by civil society organization, or this is something occurring like in the intersection of different sectors, like business, like private sector, public sector, maybe academia, maybe civil society, and you know, then you kind of these all sectors generate something new. Which can potentially make a change in the society. Then it's kind of this, whether it's local, starting with some local initiatives, and then later diffused or scaled up across the whole social system, whether they use now technologies, to a lot of extent. I have even a paper on that, on the use of technologies for social innovation during the COVID-19 pandemic. Very extensive and very interesting examples out there in all Central Asian countries. Finally, it should make a social impact that is scalable and can make, as a result, a social change. This is approach I took, which could be, of course, criticized and is criticized probably theoretically. Now, if you look on the Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, you see that all the social innovation projects that were supported by very different organizations have not satisfied the 2 final stages. Namely, they are not scalable, and we can discuss why. And they are not yet at the stage of making measurable social change. Yeah, then when you can tell this certain project already made a social change. One reason for that is that it's a relatively new concept for the region. Not only for the Central Asia, by the way. And another reason is that when we're talking about collaboration in these 2 countries of different sectors, we would see that when the government is supporting social innovation projects, then they are likely to then be replicated or scaled up and then make any change. When the support is not there, unfortunately or fortunately, they are just the local initiatives, sometimes sustainable, sometimes not, which, by the way, doesn't make them less socially innovative. But still, if we're talking about this normative end result, then the end result is not usually there. And on my final remark, which again I open for the further discussion maybe, is that the donors, the role of the donors in 2 countries. Since we're talking about developments, right? The donors are very, or used to be very interested in making these changes and developments happen in both countries. And of course, they partly saw the social innovation as a concept, as kind of a safe concept to run some innovation, some newness or some new ideas, for example, in the sector of good governance. Sometimes the donors are, by the way, very diverse. In Kazakhstan, there are tech companies like Astana Hub, the UNICEF as a donor, USAID, which, by the way, started this project of supporting social innovations under the notion or the logo of supporting civil society projects, and then turned it into the whole project into a social innovations in Central Asia, which again tells you the philosophy, the logic behind that. So there's basically even donors see the social innovation as something generated by the civil society organizations. Of course, if you talk to them, and I did, they tell you that they're open for the collaboration with private sector, with government, and so on. But in fact, it's very complicated. If, for example, it's not a case when the government is already there with donors and trying to support and to make change. I will stop here. I can, of course, tell you more than over the Q&A session about a lot of examples and on the micro level implications in both countries and possible macro level changes and a general discussion. Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much, Bahrom. Well, you wrote a book on social innovations in post-Soviet countries. Which post-Soviet country is the most successful in this regard, and maybe why? And second, well, you mentioned many examples in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, but if you could give us one example in each country that that you think was the most promising. Yes, it didn't, in the end, it didn't qualify on these last two criteria that you mentioned, but you were impressed by these initiatives. If you could address this briefly.
Sure, thank you. I have in my book I covered 8 countries: Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. Out of these 9 countries, the most promising cases are Georgia, Armenia, Moldova, and Ukraine. So you would be surprised that, for example, in Azerbaijan, the social innovation agency was created under the presidential decree in this country. So you would expect that this should be in a country like Azerbaijan, this should be a great support of social innovations, but it was limited only to some innovations or to many innovations, in fact, but in public sector, in services like Asan and so on and so on. Though there are some private companies that are also running their social innovation practices as social innovation labs. Right, and in Central Asia, the exceptional case, I would say, Kyrgyzstan, where social innovation lab is attached to the academic institution, and this is a clear, I would say, clear kind of the example of how it could work differently with the support of donors, but still run by the academicians. But the examples I've been impressed in Central Asia. Well, first of all, let me explain here that when we're talking about innovations, it should, in general, about innovations, it should be clear that the 99% probably of those innovations will fail. Yeah, and it doesn't make, as I've mentioned already in my speech, it doesn't make them less socially innovative or less innovative. This is just the nature of innovations. And in fact, if in general innovations fail, why would social innovations not, right? So this should be clear. And in Kazakhstan, let me give you several examples here. The social innovations projects were implemented in different areas. For example, in corporate social responsibility or as a form of social entrepreneurship. Here I would mention, for example, one example of social entrepreneurship development in the Kurike. Please correct my pronunciation if I am wrong in pronouncing this in Kazakh, but in Kurike, this was a program allowing accessing financial resources and increasing potential of startups for stimulating employment and entrepreneurship in this village. This was one of the projects. Okay, you see, I am calling them projects because I'm not still defining them as social innovations in a normative sense. Okay, or in corporate social responsibility, or for example, was a project with UNICEF and Astana Hub on Accessible Kazakhstan, information service for monitoring accessible and safe places for children with disabilities. Okay, things like that. In Uzbekistan, it was a project for farmers on, it was very simple, really simple innovation on producing water efficient mechanism to supply water to farmers in the rural areas. Or it was a well-known and still, by the way, a live example that was run. By the way, Aziza was the brains behind these projects, and the retail chain called Korzinka in Tashkent. Still, the eco bags are there. They are produced by the social enterprises in two regions of Uzbekistan, then supplied to this chain on the reduced price to the shelves, and people can purchase them, and by the way, buy that. Contribute to or being more environmentally friendly and contribute to the environment, which is a huge issue. Things like that, projects like that are there, and there are so many in different regions. Someone in Bukhara, which I know you haven't visited yet, Nargis, but hopefully will, has produced an app to allow people to map and outsource the problems in Bukhara city. This was also useful for the local government. It could be used, this data, to improve the lives of people in the city, things like that.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's open the floor for Q&A. And well, we have a question for Saltanat on Respublika Party in Kazakhstan. Whom is Respublika Party meant to speak for? And one more question for you. How to improve the quality of bureaucracy? How make them kind of better agents of reform?
Thank you, Nargis. I didn't get the first question clearly.
The new parliamentary, well, the new political party in Kazakhstan, Respublika, whom does it represent? If you want to address that or not.
This is, yes, thank you for it's a very specific question regarding one of the many parties in Kazakhstan. Unfortunately, yes, I don't have information about this particular party.
Well, it's sort of, I think, meant to represent like the middle classes, the business community, and so we have these two new parties, Respublika and Baituk, and which is the Green Party, and Respublika. My understanding is that like the businessman party. Okay, and the second question is more down your alley.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the second question is how to improve the quality of bureaucracy in the context of Kazakhstan. I should say, I mean, we should acknowledge that if we look at the statistical indicators, the quality of the, let's say, civil servants in terms of education, civil servants in Kazakhstan are highly educated. The age is relatively young. It's around, the average age of civil service is around like 35 years old, which is very young compared to many other states. I think the problem that civil servants in Kazakhstan are facing is that there is lack of policy analysis. Bakrom mentions in the beginning of the presentation that there is lack of policy analysis, lack of attention to disciplined public policy, which was ignored for many decades and still is, the focus is more on STEM subjects, more respect for STEM subjects, but without attention, without education and training in public policy, public administration, public management, and the policy analysis skills, it would be challenging for government officials to design good, effective policies and reforms. So we see that government officials are oriented for the very short-term horizon. Political officials want to have quick wins because they want promotion and further career development. And of course, this is not in line with longer-term, more sustainable development of public policies. Also, yeah.
And so then how is it possible? I'm quite puzzled by that, because we have we've seen these efforts to professionalize the public service for many years, right? There is a public service academy, there is a public service school at Nazarbayev University that works together with the Lee Kuan Yew School in Singapore, right? So there've been all these efforts. How come we're still weak with the policy analysis in the policy analysis department?
Yes, Nargis, you correctly mentioned that there are several institutions in Kazakhstan that are working in the field of education and training of government officials or future government officials, but it's still the overall the skill sets of the bureaucratic apparatus in terms of policy analysis and foresight, strategic decision making is not there. It is totally not enough, not there. And this is shown by the lack of consistency in political decisions when the government is making decisions, and then after realizing that there is increased public tension about this, that there is a lack of consultation on many public policy issues. So it's a very simple tool to consult with citizens on important socio-economic policies, for example, like retirement age for women. Just go and ask the opinion of female and activists or non-governmental organizations, but it's the mindset that we know the best, we know what's right for you people. This is the wrong mentality, and this is what puts the officials, the politicians, in the corner once they make consistently the same mistakes without asking opinion, without analyzing, testing, making pilots. For example, it's not the widely spread practice to make pilot tests of policy decisions and then evaluating policies. So in terms of policy evaluation, this is huge gap in terms of policy evaluation. Policy reforms are adopted, funds are spent, and then we don't know. So what have been the outcomes, the outputs of this policy, where the public money have been spent? If there have been mistakes, who is responsible for this?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sultanat. And it seems that's something that China has been doing for a long time, right? They were doing lots of pilots at the local level and then seeing what works, what doesn't work, and then then it would could be that it would spread to other places. Well, let me go to Aziza. There are two questions for you. One question on strong state. Our guest is writing, a strong state is not always a bad thing. For example, SOEs in Taiwan, Singapore, and China. What are the benefits of a strong state in Uzbekistan? And another question I want to address to you, first of all, what is the appropriate role, if any, for international foreign involvement in the reform process in the states? And what is the assessment of the what is your assessment of the effectiveness where they have been involved? And you've been on both sides, right? So you worked for donor organizations. So these are big questions.
Thank you very much for these questions. Responding to the first question about what are the good sides of having a strong state, I don't think it's anything bad. It's just what we actually define as a state, because we keep talking about executive branch. Actually, the whole discussion we spoke, all of us intuitively, we only spoke about the government, the executive arm. But we didn't even mention, I think, properly the parliament. And strong state, maybe it's just, you know, I'm just asking a question and playing a devil advocate. Maybe it's actually also having a strong pluralistic system of people who represent the public. And maybe the social contract is actually making sure that you have somebody who represents your type, way of thinking, you know, more or less close to how you see yourself in the country, a different type of, you know, stratus of society representing you in the parliament and being able to deliver what you think is important to the executive branch. So that whenever there is a decision being made, somebody actually, you know, keeps check and balance of the decisions. In the Singapore, I had a privilege to work and live, and I can tell you that it's a totally different system of disbursing any public funding. They do not spend any single dollar on subsidies. And even when they make any investment, the capital investment in the SOEs, it's always done exactly like the market would do, in the interest of you know, return on equity, return on investment, and it's never done just because it's public and somebody should save them. And that's very different system in the post-Soviet Union. And we can of course discuss many hours why it's that, what is etatism, and how actually it in a way shapes this authority / SOEs relationships in our part of the world. But in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, the same in Taiwan, it's always based on the performance. And that's actually make a difference. So in a way, I would like to say, just trying to summarize on this particular question, the state, the strength of the state in our part of the world is defined by how quickly orders can be implemented. And it's really quickly, I agree. We can quickly organize something, we can quickly make the things done and implemented at the local level, but it's all done by manual management. Perhaps we should be going towards the system where without manual intervention, without manual management, we will be able to build the systems, the quality systems that actually will work without people interfering. And that, in my view, would be the ideal strong state, because I believe the state is three components. It's executive branch, it's public, including civil society, and it's the parliament. The second question is also very interesting about the foreign involvement. What really worries me right now, and I have to say that Uzbekistan has been blessed in a way by attention of foreign financial institutions, to the extent that we've already got indebted 26 billion US dollars, it's sovereign debt. And let me put it, this is very different from what was in the Karimov time. And I'm not sure we all understand for what exactly we take money for. And I wish there were more transparency at all stages about how these money are being disbursed, how we are thinking to pay back, because to the best of my knowledge, I think next year will be the first year when we are supposed to start paying back some of the loans. It would be great to understand, so what is important driver for success of these loans, so that we have, in a way, kind of more comprehensive system of monitoring from the public oversight, side of how much we get from the international community, how much we have to pay back, and what and how we are planning to pay back. Because otherwise, by having a lot of loans, we are deferring fiscal deficit, and it's good. we don't run into fiscal deficit by having quite uninterrupted access to foreign borrowings. But the downside of it, a lot of countries started reforms, the serious reforms, only when they ended up having the fiscal deficit. So in a way, it can also give us a time and opportunity to procrastinate reforms, systemic reforms, structured reforms, by having more and more borrowings, by solving the immediate issues and problems, by having even cash handouts, helicopter money if needed, with the public to appease them, but the expense of future paying back mechanisms when they, not us, maybe our children will have to pay back. And I have to say this is something that should be done not only by the government, but also by the international community. And right now, Uzbekistan is in the process of negotiating the restitution of Gulnara Karimov's money. It will be very interesting to see whether this process will be transparent enough so that we understand as a public in Uzbekistan how this money are being used and fought for. I would say if it's not done for infrastructure programs, that's really important for people, building new schools, for example, we may be really having hard time to defining whether they were spent properly or not. So it's important that the process is transparent, public is being updated at all stages, and we together monitor how this money are being repatriated. And the amount of money at the moment is very significant, and it will be able to solve a lot of social immediate issues. But for that, executive branch should be very consistent. Donor community should be very transparent. And I know it's not easy because I spent myself a lot of years in one of those organizations, but also it should be the role of the parliament in it. Thank you.
Well, if we want to have more trust, definitely we need to have more transparency. That's for sure. That's step number one. Unfortunately, our time is up, and we can't answer all the questions. Apologies for that. But I want to ask the panelists the last question, and ask you to give a very, very, very brief response. We call this session revisiting social contract, and in a nutshell, how should Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan revisit this social contract? Like if you had to pack it in one or two sentences, how would you what would be your take? If you were a political party, what would you say? Who wants to start?
I can start.
Yes.
Yeah. So if I were a leader of the political party, of course, I think the first priority for the political leadership and the government is to make sure that, first of all, that the funds that have been illegally transferred from Kazakhstan to abroad, they would be returned and they would be invested to support the social infrastructure and improve the well-being of people. This will be the main proof of new Kazakhstan, of the genuine reforms of the new political leadership, fair redistribution of public funds, tighter control and public accountability for spending public funds, especially by national companies that ironically, for example, Samruk-Kazyna has been established to improve the well-being of people, but it has never delivered on the promises. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Aziza, Bahrom, who wants to start? Okay,
I would like to say about three things that, in my view, could actually imply that there was revisiting of the social contract. First of all, I think it should be limitation of the role of the state in the economy, whether we address it, by under the source of SOEs or anything else. The more engagement is, the more corruption is. So the less government is in the economy, less corruption, less patronage networks, more money will go to the private sector, sustaining livelihoods of people. That will most probably entail a huge transformation of state-owned enterprises and privatization in a very transparent way. Second thing, and I don't see it either in Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, but I've seen it myself, and I have to say this is really working great in Singapore. There should be 15 targets for the executive branch, for the government, the cabinet of ministers in our case. 15 targets, 1/3 of it should be social ones, linked to the budget. So until we achieve these targets, nothing else is being planned, no big, bonanza, no extravagant things, just these very down-to-earth 15 targets. It can be related to the healthcare, education, access to drinking water, to electricity, or some other things. Very, very easy to monitor and track things. And once identified for the central government, then of course, the implementation, the roadmaps could go all the way to the district levels. And people should be able to see whether they're being reached or not. This is important tool to prioritize the spending. The expenditures from the budget should be going to solve the issues that matter to people. If it doesn't matter to people, you don't do it. And last but not the least, I still believe that while we dedicated discussion very much to the government, again, to the executive branch, the social contract in Central Asia may actually require more than that. And this pluralistic political system with a parliament that will be a bit more successful in expressing the needs and concerns from different stratas of society could be a very critical vehicle. And without that pluralistic system, all the rest maybe would not work. So I wish we could see a different dimension and dynamic in the parliaments, see more people that represent us, and see more decision-making processes that are done beyond the executive branch. Thank you.
You can't detach socio-economic reforms from political reforms, basically, right? But Bahrom, the floor.
Yes, certainly this is a complicated question, and there are so many things to be done. This is for sure. I just mentioned several of them that I think very important. First, yeah, by the way, I saw the questions. I apologize for not being able to answer to all of them. Very interesting questions, by the way. On the economy, first thing that is needed, I think, before the pandemic, we were projected to grow, we in Uzbekistan were projected to grow 5.7%. This was the highest in Central Asia and Eastern Europe. By 2030, we want, or the government wants us to be in the upper middle income country, which basically requires to grow 10% annually, which is, I think, very ambitious. But if we want to do that, then first of all, we need to understand that any economic model we take, and now it's more. I know it was announced already on the movement or the shift towards the market economy, which is of course good and important and necessary. We need to understand that the models and the whole process, and this is we know from the evidence already from many different parts of the globe, is this process and any model we pick is very nuanced. Yeah, we cannot just go for the liberal reforms or the privatization without liberalization, or just liberal reforms without thoughtful also rule of the game set by the state. And this is, never-ending debate, I would say. But the reform is needed in the economy. This is clear to everybody. Yeah, this is absolutely clear to everybody, and everything that was mentioned, I mean, I cannot agree more than that. The change is needed. Informal sector should be reduced. The government role in the economy should be reduced to a certain extent. We need rules of the game, but then the rest let the business people, of course, with a certain smart role of the government to be done. Political competition, number two, I would say, very important. This is all as in the market. If you do not have this competition, then unfortunately, I don't think that any country could succeed. Of course, the certain reforms are there on the way. Some of them were announced, but again, the core issue is still there. Yeah, you can let the people be elected to the parliament with the different options and different ways, The political systems and the political science know a lot of options out there already tried and tested. But if there's no genuine political competition, the argument and counter argument, then I don't see any option would be really feasible for any country. And number three, I would say being really people-centered in doing anything, in devising any policy. We lack good quality think tank research for any policy analysis in both countries, I would say. And I think I'm pretty well aware about even the people and the organizations doing this analysis. This should be really something driving any policies in the country. The expertise. Yeah, we do have a lot of people talking about many things, which I think many of them are simply not aware about, but we need experts. And experts are the people who know and they know how to apply the advanced research methods. They know what the policy analysis is. They understand the nuances, and those people are needed. In a good sense, good technocrats. We discussed this back in 2018, I remember, with some experts. But this is needed both on the policy level, on the research, and in the government, in the parliament. I would say everywhere, and yeah, this would be my three major points to mention. Thanks.
These are all excellent points, and I can't agree more. We do need we need more good research, but practice-informed research, and that's something we're lacking. I think the kind of this cross-feeding between the research community, the scholarly community, and practitioners. So these are kind of two worlds apart sometimes. Okay, with that, let's wrap up our session today. I think we've covered really a lot of ground, and I've learned a lot. So let me thank our panelists. And let me thank the audiences who tuned in here and or watching us on YouTube. And let me thank Laura Sarjan who helped us organize